on fire. They have 18 guests. 18 which one's the fire? September. So much really hot.
Good morning, everybody. That's really lame.
Good morning.
We brought coffee. You should be excited. Round 2 is around the corner. You're a little more enthusiasm. I'm enthusiastic. Good morning.
Good morning.
Much better. Thank you very much. And good morning to everyone that's joining us on our live stream. We're able to broadcast this around the world as well. So I am very excited to see a lot of faces in Cambridge, but happy also to talk to those of you who are joining us online. My name is Kristen Linden, and I'm an Associate Director of Admissions here at MIT Sloan. I'm joined by 2 of my colleagues, Ann Connors and Jessica Cordero-Wilson, who will be assisting me with questions that come from our online audience as well. So those of you online, I'm looking forward to hearing from you if you have any questions. As many of you know, today I'm here to talk about application tips. Our round 2 deadline is next Tuesday. I can't believe that. And I want to help all of you to be as prepared as possible. I want to lift the curtain a little bit on what goes on in my office after a deadline so that you have a little bit of a sense and can kind of demystify it for you. So before I jump right into application tips, I want to start out just by telling you a little bit about the process of admissions and the process of evaluation. So you may be wondering, what happens to my application after I click that submit button? Let me tell you a little bit about what goes on after you say goodbye to your application and I say hello to it. First of all, in our office, we do not review any applications until after the deadline is passed. So there's not necessarily an advantage to submitting early, although I think it's always a good idea for you to submit early just so that it is done. You're not rushing to do it at the last second. You're not meeting in traffic and trying to submit when everyone else is submitting. But we are not going to give you an advantage in the process. We're not going to start reviewing your application right away. We don't review anything until after the deadline is passed. At that point, we review every application that we receive. Our process involves a competency-based model. And when we're reviewing applications, there are 2 primary buckets or categories of competencies that we're looking for. The first is something that we call demonstrated success. These are the things I like to think of as the more quantitative, quantifiable aspects of your application. Things like your test score, whether it be Gmat or GRE, your undergraduate GPA, as well as GPAs and classes that you've taken outside of an undergrad, if you've got a master's degree, if you studied for a CFA, if you got any kind of licensing, if you took any extended coursework outside of your schooling. We're looking at that as well. And then your career progression. And this can be defined in many different ways. It's not necessarily just promotions that you've received or salary increases, but also the impact that you've had in whatever role that is, and what that impact has been compared to peers that were in a similar position. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment and where we might find that data when I go into more of the individual application components, but that is what we like to call demonstrated success. The other category is leadership attributes. These are the things I like to think of as the soft skills. Being able to see how you interact with other people, working on teams. Are you able to lead others and influence others, but in a respectful way? Can you think outside the box and solve problems, and how are you able to do that? Are you driven? Are you proactive? Do you set goals? And are you not afraid when those goals involve some risk or some additional hard work to be able to achieve them? Those are the leadership attributes. Together, we're reviewing for these 2 types of data. Obviously, we're looking for individuals who are strong in both of them. Those are the individuals we would like to move forward with an interview. I should also mention that all of this review takes place within our admissions committee, which is made up of professionally trained admissions officers. So we do not involve faculty in this process. We do not involve current students or alums in this process. It's all individuals who are trained within our office, know how to calibrate on applications, understand our scoring methodology so that the review is the same across the board, regardless of who might be looking at an application at any given time. Once we get to that point of making interview decisions, we send an invitation. Our process is invitation only for an interview, so you cannot request one, you have to be invited for one. We travel to several hub cities around the world in each round, usually anywhere from 12 to 15 cities, in addition to right here in Cambridge. And for the most part, our interviews are all face-to-face. There are extenuating circumstances where we do have Skype interviews, such as someone who is deployed in the military, or they're living in a location that's very remote and we are not traveling anywhere near to where they might be. So those would be the determining factors for us. When we meet with you, we have a behavioral-based interview. Basically, looking at the same types of competencies that I already listed for you that we look for in a written application. Looking to make sure that those competencies line up in person as they did on paper. Looking to expand to see that perhaps we didn't see a lot of evidence of one competency within the written application. Can we find it through an interview with you? Addressing any concerns, clarifying any lingering questions that we might have, but basically looking for those same competencies. And then we're scoring on them in the same way we would score on them in the read. After that, we're coming back from meeting as a committee and we're determining out of that group who stands out to us, who we would like to admit into the class. So that gives you a sense of what that process looks like behind the scenes. Now let me tell you a little bit about what I might be looking for in the application that can tie back to those competencies. Number one, a resume. We ask for a professional resume, 1 page. There are a lot of guidelines listed in our application as to what that format then should look like. Some tips for you on how to formulate a resume and what it is that I want to see in a read that can help me to make that scoring happen. I mentioned I like to see quantifiable evidence. I like to understand your work progression and your impact. The best way to do this is to quantify that impact in your resume. I'm not so much interested in what your day-to-day responsibilities are. What I'm interested in are what are those accomplishments, and can you put a number to them? Can you tell me that you increased revenue X%, or you trained X number of people? How can you give me some kind of numerical value for the work that you've done and how it's impacted the company at large? Less focused on the actual task. Another great place for me to see that work progression and that evidence, and I know this is skipping down a few things, but letters of recommendation. I'll talk a little bit about how to choose a letter in a minute, but that is another great place for me to see how you compare to your peers, how someone who has supervised you has seen that progression and can say, out of people I've worked with in the past, I've really seen this person grow more rapidly, I've seen them take on greater responsibility than what's expected of them, and that's how they stand out in the crowd. Also on your resume, really be sure to follow the guidelines. I know some individuals really like to design a very flashy resume. Sometimes it's hard for me to see that information when it's in different columns or it has lots of color coding. A standard resume is what we prefer. Number two, a cover letter. Our cover letter asks a very specific question to tell us how you meet the qualifications of a Sloanee. Essentially, it's just like any other professional cover letter when you're applying for a job. That cover letter is going to list out, here are the things that you're looking for, here is what I bring to the table and how I already have those things. It's not a place to sell yourself on why I want to come to Sloan. Just like if you were applying for a job, you wouldn't use your cover letter to say, here is all the reasons why I want to work for your company, instead of here is what I bring to your company. And so that's what we're asking you. What do you bring to MIT Sloan? We list in the question exactly the qualities that we're looking for, and then we ask you to provide specific examples of the ways that you've already done those things so that we know that you'll continue to do them in the future. This is a lot of where that leadership attribute can come in. You can really speak to specific examples where you have led a team, where you have thought outside the box and come up with a problem, where you have embodied those qualities that are listed in the application. So really think about what examples can best speak to some of those qualities, rather than focusing on, I really want to take these classes, I really want to join these clubs. The organizational chart. That is a new feature this year. I know there's a lot of concern about it. There are a lot of questions about it. I actually really love it, and I think that you should love it too, and let me tell you why. Oftentimes, if I'm looking at resumes, it's easy to get caught up in someone's job title, but a job title doesn't tell you the whole story. And many people can have a very similar job title, but it means different things in different organizations. If you're working in a relatively flat organization that's small, perhaps everyone is a vice president. But what is it that you actually do, and what's the impact that you're having? Who are you working with on a regular basis? Versus someone who's in a larger organization and maybe their job title is not vice president. Maybe it's not as larger than life than someone else. But the things that they're doing within that large organization are much beyond what would be expected of them at this point in their career. So being able to see that visually is really helpful for someone like me. The organizational chart is really for us to be able to visualize where you sit within an organization. It also helps us, in conjunction with your resume, to get a sense of what that progression might have been. If we know that you've been at a certain company for several years and you've had some promotions, we might be able to see that visually on an organizational chart rather than trying to assume what those jumps look like or where they might be. The org chart also is really helpful for showing us some of those dotted line relationships to help us to see that you have interactions beyond just with your direct manager, that you might work with other groups, with other departments, with other senior leaders within the organization. That helps a lot as well. It is also a great place for us to see if you have any direct reports. And I know that this is a big concern because people are afraid that we're just here to count the direct reports and that we're doing some type of tally to see, well, this person has 5 and this person has 4, and that plays somewhere in our decision making. I can promise you that it does not. It's only to see if you have them, to help us to see what that leadership might look like and what that management experience might look like. But I'm not counting them up. I'm not doing some type of tally. It's not a part of that overall evaluation that I mentioned earlier. So please don't worry about it. I also know that no organization is the same, no 2 orgs are the same. It's hard to give you a template to follow when coming up with this chart. We have provided one in the application, but that is not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. So we really put it on you to know your organization the best and know also how to best illustrate it for us. So we have given a couple of unique situation guidelines for you. Number 1, if you work in consulting, what we're really looking for here is a project organizational chart. So we understand how consulting firms are structured, we understand the hierarchy, but projects are different, and perhaps there's a project that you can showcase that really show you being able to take the lead on something and being able to step up into a position that is more of an acting leadership position. I think that's a great opportunity to display that. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, or maybe you're a contractor, you work individually, sometimes I like to think of this as more of a spider web. You're sitting at the center, and here are all the different constituents that you interact with. Maybe there's an advisor, maybe there's some investors, maybe there's some clients. That also is really helpful. That helps me to understand who are the other people that you work with. You don't just work alone, even if you may be the solo person within the organization. You work with lots of different people, and that I would like to know more about. So again, I know that this seems a bit overwhelming if your organization doesn't publish a chart online for you to simply copy and paste. If you need to redact information, if you need to not show people's names, whatever it is that you need to do to follow specific guidelines within your organization, we understand. We just ask that you try to give us as clear a picture as possible so that we can better understand you. Really, it only serves to help you. I'm going to move on now to letters of recommendation. I mentioned this a little earlier as a great place to talk about how you stand out in your position. This is really essential because this is one of those pieces of the application that you don't always have control over. You have control in terms of choosing the right person, but what that person is going to say, you're not writing a letter for them. So that's why it's in your best interest to choose the right individuals. I am always asked about who is that right individual? Who should I select? I think there are a lot of different things to consider here. Number 1, you want to choose the person who knows you the best, someone who has supervised you. The questions that we ask in the application of a recommender, you can read them, you can see them. So my advice to you is to read them to yourself and think, is this someone who can answer these questions and provide a lot of detail? Can they provide specific examples of me showing this kind of growth? Do they know me professionally well enough, or are they too far removed from me? And your answer to that question is really going to help in guiding you in who you select. I am not evaluating your recommender. I'm evaluating you. So the title of that recommender doesn't so much matter to me so long as they're someone who is senior to you, who has seen you and supervised you in that kind of way. I'm not looking for the CEO, unless you know them, unless you work closely with them, unless they know you well and can speak to those examples. But a letter from your CEO just saying, I met them in the elevator, or I had coffee with them, they get really great performance reviews annually, and I think they would be a great contribution to your program. That's not going to help me. That's not going to give me the type of evidence that I'm looking for and the type of detail that I'm looking for. So that may not be the best choice. Also not a good choice, a family member if you work in a family business, a peer, or even a co-founder if you are an entrepreneur. We would like someone who is more senior to you, not someone who is on the same level to you. So really think about those things. Think about who can best speak. We also understand, much like the org chart, everyone's going to have a unique situation. So perhaps you are not sharing with your company that you're planning to get an MBA. In this case, a past supervisor would be perfectly fine. We do ask, though, that we have an additional information section about extenuating circumstances, that maybe you note there that you did not get a current supervisor recommendation for this reason. Again, everyone has a unique situation, so we completely understand as long as you spell that out for us. And I'm going to talk about that additional information section in a minute and what that would be really used for. We also ask for transcripts from every school where you've received a degree. If you studied abroad and those courses and grades are listed on your transcript, we do not need a transcript from that school. If those classes are not listed as transfer credits and there's grades attached to them, I think it would be in your best interest to include that study abroad transcript. We get this question often. Next, Gmat or GRE. I don't really care which one you take. Everyone asks, is there a preference? There's not a preference. The preference is yours. Which one are you more comfortable with? If you feel like you could do better on one versus the other, if you want to take both, absolutely fine with me. I'm only going to look at the scores that you share in the application, and it is entirely up to you how many you want to share if you've taken the test more than one time. If you only want to share your highest score, that's the only score I'm going to look at. If you want to show me that you had a lower score and you improved it, and you feel like that's something that you want me to know about, by all means, share that as well. But I'm only going to use what you put into the application, and that's what I'm going to base my evaluation on. Video statement. Another very hot topic in our application, somewhat unique, asking you to do a 1-minute video and tell us more about yourself. Basically, introduce yourself to your future classmates. I have lots of tips on this because I've watched a lot of videos, and I can tell you what makes a good video and what makes a bad video. What makes a bad video? I think there's two extremes. One is the individual who wears a suit jacket and a tie, professionally dressed, and just reiterates their resume to me, thinking that that's what I'm looking for, because it is a professional application. It makes sense, but I already asked you for a resume. I already asked you for all of this other information within your application. So the video isn't going to add anything here if it's only reiterating what I already know about you. This video is meant for me to get to know you better, to get a better sense of who you are, to provide some context outside of the professional realm. Our application is very lean, so there aren't always a lot of those opportunities to share those more personal aspects of yourself. And the video is a great way. It breaks my heart, and I want to shake someone when they don't use that opportunity and they just use it to reiterate what I've already learned about you. On the other hand, there are individuals who perhaps go a little bit too far outside the professional application realm with what they record in their video. Believe it or not, we have gotten videos of individuals, much like Elle Woods in Legally Blonde, in their bathing suits. Really pushing the limits outside of what I should see about you and learn about you. It's true. Maybe I'm dating myself. Is Legally Blonde still relevant? People watch that movie anymore? Anyway, please remember that you are still applying for a position here at MIT Sloan. So I do want to get to know you, but I also want to have a little bit of personal space. So consider what it is that you're sharing with us. Really use your judgment about what is the best information that I should know about you, that I can't glean from any other part of your application, but that will be relevant for me in this process of learning a bit about who you are, what your personality is like. A few other video tips. Often people will do their video in a place that they love, a place that takes them outside of their office or outside of their home, the outdoors, or going on a hike, or at their favorite cafe. Be mindful that I also need to hear you. The location is great. I love that people choose places that mean something to them, that give me something exciting and interesting and different than just sitting in front of the camera at their desk. But if I can't hear what they're saying because there's a lot of background noise, then I lose that aspect of getting to know something about them. And where you are is important, but really what you're telling me is the most important. So really think about that. Think about background noise. Think about where you're sitting. I don't want to see your dirty laundry in the background, so be mindful of where you're shooting this. The great thing about our video is that it allows you to upload it yourself. You record it yourself. It's not as though you're timed. The camera doesn't just turn on at your desk when you're in the middle of your application and you have no idea what's around you. You have the benefit of getting to choose. So choose wisely, because then I'm watching and I'm thinking, did they really think about what they were doing when they decided to record this video in this place or with this kind of background noise? Really think about those things. Lastly, our additional information section, which is optional. I really want to highlight the word optional here because we've gone through many different application iterations in the past. In the past, we had an optional section that we really encouraged people to fill out. That optional section doesn't exist anymore. It's now been replaced by the video statement that I just mentioned. So we don't have that same type of optional multimedia aspect anymore. Our optional question is now, truly optional, and it is only meant for extenuating circumstances. So I mentioned earlier, if you're choosing someone who's not a direct supervisor, that might be a great place to talk about it. If there is some blip in your academics that you want to explain, and I do use the word explain, I don't want excuses, I like explanations. I want you to take responsibility for what might have happened, but I do like to understand it better. Anything that I might be seeing in your application that wouldn't make sense to me if you didn't give me an explanation is a great thing to share in this section. I don't like to make assumptions, but if there is some type of lack of clarity, my assumption is going to be I might assume the worst. I might assume incorrectly. So don't let me do that. Fill those gaps in for me. Help me to understand what really happened. But definitely don't make excuses. Use explanations. I think that I covered every one of those little aspects of the application. Anything that I missed? Okay. So
I guess just recommendations have to be on time.
that is a great point. So I mentioned the importance of recommendations and in choosing who you are going to ask. Choose someone who can do the recommendation. Give them enough advance notice that you need the recommendation. I can't tell you how many times we get an email from a recommender. It says, this automated email, because you enter their email into our system, and as soon as you enter their email, they get a link that has them upload their recommendation directly. They'll email and say, this automated email just came today, and it says that the deadline is at 3 o'clock this afternoon. I can't believe that you would just send me this email today, MIT Sloan. Applicant, that's you. So if they didn't know that this was coming until the morning of the deadline, and you're just giving them a couple of hours to fill it out, that's your responsibility. And if they're late, then the possibility for us in reviewing your application is we may have to review it without that letter, in which case you have less evidence to help support your candidacy. So it's in your best interest to ask early, make sure that you're asking someone who can devote time to it and give it a good recommendation, a strong recommendation, one that really develops all of the answers to those questions, and then remind them. You can see in your application, even after you submit, you can submit without all of your recs, but you'll see a checklist. There's a big red X next to someone's name. You need to get on the phone with that person and remind them that that deadline's coming up and they're still missing something. And can they please set aside some time to upload it for you? But the sooner the better. So if any of you are working on your round 2 application and you haven't entered that person's name in, please go home today and enter it in so that they can have the time to remember what that deadline is and they have the link right away to get working on it. So very quickly, I will just have a little reminder about our deadlines before I take some questions. Obviously, our round 1 deadlines have passed and our LGO round 2 deadline has passed. Right now, we're looking at round 2, January 22nd, next Tuesday. So if you're working on that round 2 app, put those finishing touches on. I hope that the tips that you're learning today can help you in finalizing what you need to know. We also do have a round 3. This is often a question I get as well about the different rounds. When is the best time to apply? First of all, hands down, my advice is apply when you're ready. You never want to rush your application to get into an earlier round if you don't feel like you've had proper time to prepare. If you're not happy with your test score and waiting an extra round to improve it can be a possibility, I recommend doing that. I recommend really sitting down, or if you're busy at work, if it's a busy time for you, and you feel like you're going to rush through that cover letter and rush through that resume to just get it submitted, and not devote time to perhaps looking at different drafts or having someone review it with you, you're not putting your best foot forward. So definitely take the time and think about the timing. However, I can tell you that in round 1, I have 350 seats to offer to candidates. We have a class of 400, 50 of those are from our LGO program. So for MBA alone, I have 350 seats. By round 2, I don't have 350 seats anymore. Every year it's a little bit different about how many seats I might have, but I have a lot of flexibility at round 1 because perhaps I have an idea in my head of how many people I'd like to admit, but I have that ability to, if I really like other candidates, to admit them in round 1. And perhaps they start taking seats up that other rounds will not have available to them. That is not to say that you shouldn't apply, because if you waited to round 2 to really put the extra time into your application to have a stronger application, you might not have been successful in round 1 if you rushed it. But in round 2, you're prepared. You're ready to put forth the strongest application possible. I will say that the majority of the candidates they would admit come from round 1 and round 2. There certainly are some that we accept from round 3. But again, if you think about what I just mentioned about how many seats I might have available by the time that round 3 rolls around, and the strength of that applicant pool in round 1 and round 2, round 3 gets a little bit tougher. That's not to dissuade you, because again, if you've taken time to be able to improve on your application, you might be putting forth a stronger application by waiting than you would have if you had rushed. Right. So half of this time has been for me to talk at you. I would love to now take time to answer your questions, both from our online audience as well as from the audience in this room. Now, I want to make one suggestion that if you have questions that are very specific to your situation, we will certainly be around, hanging around this room afterwards, Anne and Jessica and myself, to answer them. But if you have questions that you think the larger group can benefit from, I would love to be able to answer them, because what you're wondering, someone else might be wondering too. And in that way, we're sharing all of our questions together, and I'm able to answer all of them at once in essence. So definitely let me know how I can help you, how we can help you to be best prepared for this upcoming deadline. Yes?
I have a question about the org chart. Is it only for your current role, or can you also upload one from past roles?
Good question. So for those online that didn't hear, we have a question about the org chart. Should I only upload an org chart from my current role, or should I upload historical roles as well? I'm only really looking for one from your current role. The only time that I would say it would be in your best interest to upload a previous one is if you just started your job. If you have something that's perhaps more reflective of your career progression from your last role and you're brand new, so it's hard to say who it is that you really interact with currently, then I would upload both. You certainly can upload both. And we also do say that you can upload a 2-page organizational chart, so if you need to break it into 2 pages to be able to expand it, that's acceptable as well. But for the most part, I really should only be seeing one. Yes?
I have a question. So in terms of people who are accepted but then get deferred 1 year, do they typically come from accepted students in round 3 because there's less space?
Students who are accepted and get deferred.
Yeah.
For the most part, students who are deferring are requesting a deferral. We're not deferring them. They are saying, I would like to, I just got a promotion. I have this great opportunity. I was planning on starting my MBA in the fall, but things have changed. I would like to put this off a year, and they're requesting that on a case-by-case basis. So it's not necessarily just from round 3. I would say it comes from all rounds, because this happens at different points in the process. Someone who we admit in round 1, they pay their deposit, and in the next 3 months, have this great work opportunity and say, I would still like to be a Sloaney, but I need to take this opportunity right now. So I wouldn't categorize them only as round 3.
Online question. If a recommender is from a previous job, should you include a separate org chart from that previous job?
That's a good question. If a recommender is from a previous job, I do not need to see an org chart from that job. I know the template online shows a picture of highlighting your recs within the org chart, but if one of your recs is outside of that organization or from a past organization, you don't need to show their org chart. I really just need to see your org chart. Isn't that right?
We have 2 full-time jobs, a regular full-time job and a startup. Should I supplement org chart for both, or?
I think that's a good idea. If you have more than one full-time job, if you are working full-time at your startup as well as full-time elsewhere, I think it's good to submit both. What I want to say though is I see a lot of people who have a startup on the side, and I want to get a sense of what stage that you're at. So if you're at a stage where you've really established that company, that it's worthwhile in showing an org chart, I think that's great. If you're more early stage where you're just tinkering with ideas, you don't have any clients yet, you don't have any investors yet, that might not be something that you need to show me just yet. Yes?
What are some examples of videos that you thought very positively of that made a difference?
Great question. What are good examples of videos? I only talked about bad examples. So I will tell you one good example. I don't want it to scare you, but I really love it. And this individual set up his camera, and he liked doing water sports. So the very first 5 seconds of the video are him parasailing into the view, and then talking to me about what he likes to do. But he didn't even have to say anything for me to know what he likes to do, because he just showed up on the screen doing what he likes to do. I could hear him clearly, so that there wasn't any detriment to him doing something outdoors where there might potentially be noise. And I'm not telling you that you need to learn how to parasail to have a successful video, but I learned something about him. Someone else that really stands out to me is someone who was in the Peace Corps and was showing different artifacts, different things that it was shot where they were. I think they were in Tanzania, and they had their journal. All they did was talk at the camera. They didn't enter in a fancy way. They didn't have some kind of sport that they were playing that requires a lot of effort. Or it was more just them really opening up about what's meaningful to them in a place that's meaningful to them. So it can go both ways. You don't need to have any kind of fancy hobby to display for me, but I really like it when I already learned something about you just from the choice of where you're shooting your video or what you're doing in the background. I should also mention that it's really important to follow the guidelines of having it be 1 minute. I do appreciate it when it's only a minute long, because in the interest of time, we all want to make sure that we have enough time to review all parts of your application. Online question?
Yes, so the cover letter, you mentioned not talking about Sloan. Where do you suggest talking about Sloan and why MIT?
That is a great question, because we don't ask anywhere in the application why Sloan, why an MBA. And this is on purpose, because 80% of our students are career changers. And some of them know that that's why they're getting an MBA, to change careers. Other people don't realize that until they arrive on campus. So for us, we can't evaluate you based on a hypothetical. We're not interested necessarily right now in what you want to do or why you want to come to Sloan. That might come a little bit later. That might come at the interview stage of really getting a sense of, have you done your research? Do you understand what an MBA will bring to you at this point in your career? Do you have a general idea of what Sloan has to offer and how it aligns with those goals, and is that realistic? But at the application stage, we're not really looking for that. We don't admit people, we don't interview people based on future goals that we know might change. We also know, unfortunately, that talking about Sloan is a great way for people to feel like they're telling us what we want to hear. That they can tell us they're interested in the sustainability certificate, they can tell us that they're interested in finance, they can tell us whatever they want to tell us. That doesn't mean it's true, which is why we can't evaluate you on it, because we don't always know if that's really the case, or if you're just saying something because you think that's going to help you get your foot in the door and get to the interview stage. So, in fact, we don't really ask. Now, if you want to add one sentence to your cover letter about it and just briefly say, based on all of this that you've learned about me, of my past experiences, here's what I think I can bring to Sloan and what I can gain from it, I think that's fine. The cover letter has a word limit, so you want to choose your words carefully and ensure that you're answering the question we ask with those words, rather than using the words to fulfill your own desire to tell us information that we're not actually asking for. I think my phrase that I always share is, your past success is the best predictor of your future success. So focus on the past and less on the hypothetical future. Yes?
On the subject of the cover letter, do you find it's more effective when candidates go into one or two examples in detail, or touch on multiple things, maybe at a bit of a higher level?
Yep, one or two examples in detail I think is great, because oftentimes that will show me multiple competencies within one example. I'm always wanting to know, and this is usually our interview processes, we're not asking a lot of questions, we're asking a few questions with a lot of follow-up to get a sense of, well, how did you do that? And what was the response to that? And when you met that obstacle, then how did you overcome that obstacle? So I think fewer examples in greater detail is going to be more helpful.
Thank you.
Yes?
Hi, is there a process by which you can update your application if something relevant happens after you submit your application? So if you get a promotion like a month after you submit, or
Yes.
your startup?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think it's mbaadcom.mitsloan.mit.edu. It'll be in the email that you receive as a confirmation of submitting your application. So certainly, if things change, we want to know about that. I think the email actually specifies that we don't accept changes, but that might mean just saying, oh, well, I just want to rewrite my essay. That's not something that we'll accept. But if you retake a test and you get an improved score, if there's a promotion or a change to your job, or you left your job and you've gone somewhere else, those are the things that we want to know about. So please do update us about them.
Can you talk more about the letters of support from the community?
Sure, good question. So often we hear from current students or alums that have connections to applicants and they submit a letter of, what we call a letter of support. We do not call it a letter of recommendation because we want it to be an even playing field. We only accept 2 letters of recommendation, letters of formal recommendation that are a part of the application that get read and reviewed in the application process. However, if there is an individual that you know that wants to support your candidacy, someone who has a connection to Sloan and they want to alert us that they know someone that is applying, we certainly put value in what our alums and current students have to say because they know the community. They may not always know that demonstrated success category that I mentioned. They may not always know if someone is as strong as they might be in that category, but they definitely know that this person can work on a team or they've had previous experiences with them in them achieving goals and working really hard. So they want to speak to continuing this wonderful community that we have. And if they think someone's a good fit, we certainly want to know about it. So any of those individuals that want to pass a note our way, just to let us know that they have experience with an applicant and they want to support their candidacy, simply email us the same email that I mentioned above, mba@MIT.Sloan@MIT.edu. Again, in your application confirmation. That is not to say that these individuals will get admitted. That is not to say that these individuals get an interview. It's one data point amongst many. It might help us to learn more about a candidate, but that does not mean that they're going to be preferred in the application process by any means. Yes?
Just to follow up on that, when you're doing a letter of support, is there guidance on how long that should be?
Nope, as long or as short as that person feels that they want to share. Now, I don't want a 5-page letter necessarily, but it also could just be a quick note. I've seen it from other, students saying, we went to college together, really think he'd be a great fit for our community, or she and I volunteered together, and I really enjoyed getting to know her, and I think that she would be a good fit for our community again. So it could be a sentence, it could be a longer email with an attachment. It's whatever form that person feels comfortable in what they have to say. Other questions? I'm sure there must be.
Can you talk a little bit more about the org chart with consulting? Should it be your largest project, your most recent project? If you're working currently on 2 projects, what should you do?
Good question. So to reiterate for anyone that might not hear, if you are a consultant and you're submitting a org chart, what's going to speak the most? Which type of project am I looking to see? That's entirely up to you. Again, this is one of those things where we're putting the ball in your court to decide what you want us to know about you. What I think might be useful is if there's a project where you were kind of given more of an acting leadership role. That was something that's beyond what's expected of you at this particular level. So maybe you were not the manager, but there is no manager on this project, so you're kind of stepping into that role. Those are the types of things that I like to see because it helps me to understand, oh, this person had an opportunity, they were entrusted with this opportunity to report up higher than what's expected of someone in this particular situation. A large project could be another option of, wow, I had to manage multiple people in this project because it was larger than what we anticipated. That could also show me that leadership ability. So again, it's really up to you to choose which project might be most meaningful. But it doesn't necessarily have to be your current project if that's not the one you want to showcase for me. Yes?
Could you provide a little insight about what's the percentage of the applicants get accepted in round 1, round 2? It's like in round 1 that going to over 10%, and then round 2 less than 10%. I'm just curious about the rough numbers.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. It changes every year. And of course, I can't really share that midpoint number. We like to joke, for the Patriots fans in the room, it's halftime. We can't really share those kind of data points yet at this point. But as I said, I obviously have more space available in round 1. Round 1 applicants tend to be very strong, and they are here applying in round 1 because it may be their top choice. So we may give the benefit of the doubt, or we may make that assumption that if we have these people who are submitting really early and we like them, that we can offer them a seat, and that may take a seat away from someone who's applying further down the road. But the difference changes every year based on what that round 1 applicant pool is going to look like, so it's really hard to kind of put a number on it. saw a hand over here, yes.
If there's additional detail with respect to the org chart that you can add, for example, I started a really small company and it since grew to be quite large. Is it helpful to add some of that detail or is that too much?
Good question. So for those on live stream, if you need to add some color or some context to your org chart to explain further that the company's grown or other circumstances, should you share that? I absolutely think yes. I think that additional information, extenuating circumstances section is a great place to do that because it kind of explains and expands on something else in another part of your app. So that's what I would use. Great. Yes.
Going back to the org chart, for a large organization, like what's the right balance between leaving or omitting like teams that are relevant but not like you don't work with on a day-to-day, weekly basis to prevent like the cluttering of the org chart?
Absolutely. So when I think of it, I think the branching should really be of your unit or your department. I like to see maybe the department itself displayed. Other departments across, of there may be 6 different departments that report up. And mine is this one, and I'm going to branch this one further. But I'm just going to show a little block up here to show you that there is this other department, and I may dotted line work with them every once in a while, or here's the person that I would work with dotted line, or in parentheses, here's how many people make up that department. But I don't need to see everybody branched out in detail of they have this many, and then this person has that many. The focus is obviously on you and where you sit within the organization and who you report up to. So giving me the magnifying glass on you is what I want to see. Yes.
For the round 3 application, would you have concern on time-consuming visa process for international students and as a result include less of them?
Great question. Round 3 and international applicants. I highly encourage international applicants to apply in round 1 or 2. And obviously for this year, it's round 2. Exactly for the concern of what you mentioned of visa processing. It's very difficult to speed up a process, and in fact, we have no control over speeding up that process. I can't speed up a process for someone, regardless of how strong they may be. This is one of those situations, I think we had a question earlier about deferred applicants, and most of them are requesting a deferral. But if we do see someone who's really strong in round 3, but we know that there's no way that a visa is going to be possible, we might offer them admission for the following year, but it's very unlikely that we would offer them admission for this coming fall, given that timeline, given what's going on right now in the United States with visa processing. There are a lot of concerns about how quickly we would be able to make that happen for someone or facilitate it, and we really have no say in it. So definitely encourage someone who's an international candidate to apply sooner rather than later. Thank you. Yes.
How does Sloan feel, let's say candidate's past experience in community service and social service is going to add value to his or her application? Is that a good way to exemplify, leadership capabilities or other skill sets?
Yeah, absolutely. If you are someone that does volunteer, are you speaking it from a career or from a volunteer? Either way, I think the resume is an excellent place to highlight that. I think in the video, if it's something that you're passionate about, perhaps you want to talk about those volunteer experiences or why you decided to pursue more of a social role. Certainly it's valued because Sloan is a community that wants to improve the world. You can see it on our mission statement up on the E62 wall as you're coming up the stairs. So we do really want to see that kind of experience. And I think the competencies align very well regardless of what industry you work in, of showing that you can lead and showing that you care about other people and you work well on a team and showing that you can problem solve. Certainly in the social sector, you need all of those skills because you don't always have the resources that you might have elsewhere. But I think it's just one more data point for us to consider, and the resume is a good place to highlight it. And then in the back.
In thinking through the examples for the cover letter, how important is recency for choosing those?
Good question. So for those online, how important is it to show recent examples in that cover letter? I like to see relatively recent, so within the past 3 years, I think is good to know. Certainly for us, in our minds, we're thinking that if you are the type of person that has these qualities, you should have more than one example of them. It should be a consistent behavior, not a one-time flip. So you shouldn't need to walk back 5 or 6 years to show me an example of you influencing someone, because if that's the type of person you are, it should be something that you can show me on multiple occasions. And knowing that in the interview, I'm going to ask questions around those similar types of behavioral examples, and I don't want a repetition from your essay or from your application. I want to know more. I want to see that that wasn't a one-time example. So being able to show me something that's more recent will be important. Do you have an online question, Anne?
Should you edit the video or should it be a clear cut?
Great question. Should you edit the video? No. Solid, no. I don't want to see any fancy transitions. I definitely don't want to see that you've hired some type of company to film it for you. I don't need to see your name at the bottom. Please no. This is a big part of why we moved from what was once the optional, not optional multimedia submission to this standalone video and saying everyone has to submit a video and upload it. Because we often saw in that optional section that people had fancy editing skills, or perhaps they didn't have the fancy editing skills, but they hired someone who had fancy editing skills. And it certainly made the video look wonderful compared to someone who was just talking at their camera, but that was really an unfair advantage. We just wanted to get to know the person. We didn't want to see all their editing skills and what they were able to do with fancy video software. So don't edit it. It should be a single take, 1 minute long, of you talking to the camera. I don't need any fades or wipes or any of that. I have seen people do some very unique things, so talking back to examples of good videos and how they are able to think outside the box. Instead of doing a video where there's a PowerPoint slide and them talking over it, or if they wanted to show things, they might have their computer behind them or a screen and they're clicking to say, here's a picture of me doing these things. So instead of uploading something that involved that they did it within their own presentation of talking to me. I liked that. I liked that they incorporated things that they wanted to show me, that they felt like, okay, the video instructions are kind of constraining me to say I shouldn't edit my video to include this. However, I'm going to find a way to do it while still following those directions. I think that's really smart. So ways to incorporate, what you might have done through fancy editing, but doing it through just you telling me about you is a really good way of demonstrating that to me in a video. Yes?
What about removing just background noise and those kind of edits? Is that acceptable?
I would not. I would just shoot in a place where you're not going to have that. So consider that. Where am I shooting? Will you be able to hear me? And if you can't, maybe I should think of a different place. Yes.
If you already have a master's degree, should you highlight this, talk about this in your cover letter? Should you talk about it in the additional info section? I could see a reviewer potentially saying, okay, they have an advanced degree already, why are they getting an MBA? So just where would the best place be to talk about that?
Good question. So for those online, if you already have an advanced degree, should you highlight it beyond just in your resume? Should you explain why you're getting an MBA after having this degree? I will say not necessarily. There are some situations where I do think it's important to do that. One would be if your advanced degree is an MBA already, and you're applying for a second MBA. That I would have questions about, and that I think you should highlight in the extenuating circumstances section, because obviously we have a core here, there's required coursework, it will probably be repetitive of what you've already done. I want to know why you feel the need to do this program a second time around, but at Sloan. For other advanced degrees, I'm less concerned about that, because it's not entirely unfamiliar for someone to have gotten, a fifth-year master's, or for this, again, to be a career-changing move. You're getting an MBA, you're maybe deciding that I went along this path that included getting a master's degree because I really needed it for this potential role or function that I no longer want to do. And this is going to be my opportunity to make that switch. And I need this MBA to make that switch. So I don't think you always need to explain it. I think it's when it might create further questions about, wow, this is a big jump to make, or this is something that you've already done, why would you do it again, that you would want to note that in that additional information section. Yes.
Along the lines of advanced degrees, if I graduated from one recently, so within the last 3 years, and had a project that meant a lot to me, could I use that project advisor as a recommender, or include something about it in my cover letter or resume?
Yeah, so if you 3 years ago graduated, had a close relationship with a faculty member or someone at school, wanted to have that person included in your application, I would think carefully in terms of using them as a formal recommender. Is there someone better that can more recently speak? Now, If this is a person that you still regularly meet with, they serve as a professional mentor to you, maybe they weren't just your faculty member, but they were your research advisor, or you worked with them in a professional context in addition to being in their class, and you still are in touch with them regularly and they know about what you're doing right now. That I can see being included. However, if that relationship has tapered off, if they're not aware of what you're doing right now, and especially if you can think of someone that from a professional aspect can speak more strongly to your candidacy, maybe that person isn't a recommender. Maybe it's mentioning it in your cover letter, or in your resume, or in your video. Maybe it's talking about it in some other place, but it's not necessarily using that person when there may be someone who knows you currently better and can speak to what you're currently doing more. I hope that helps. Yes.
Will there be a recording of this posted anywhere?
Will there be a recording of this? I think yes.
Yes. On YouTube.
On YouTube. So if you need to look back, certainly you'll have that opportunity to look back. That's a little scary.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be there forever.
Give us 2 days.
We have 5 minutes left. Any other questions? Online as well. Any questions online? Yes.
For the letters of support, do you think there's a kind of a fine line of, should you have one, or is there a kind of a maximum that you guys want to hear from?
So I can hear from none, honestly. It doesn't matter to me if you know someone from Sloan or you don't know someone from Sloan. Like I said, it's another data point for us, but I would never hold it against anyone for having 0. I would never, expect to see at least 5 to know that this person has support. I think it's important that if you know someone from Sloan, that you know them well enough, and if it could be them deciding that they want to do it on their own, or if you're asking them, just be sure it's someone that knows you well enough to want to kind of put their name on the line to back you. I've certainly seen examples where an alum is emailing us saying, hey, admissions, this person approached me and they're applying and they want me to support them, but honestly, I don't really know them all that well, so I'm just going to leave it at that and let you know that I know them and I work with them, but I don't actually have a close relationship with them. That is certainly not going to help me. That's them reaching out to anyone that they might know that went to Sloan just to put in a good word for them. But if they don't have a close relationship, how will I? That person isn't even putting their name on the line in favor, and they're not able to tell me the qualities that this candidate has that would make a good Sloanee. So you want to be judicious of who's supporting you, but certainly I do see people who have a lot of support because they know a lot of Sloanees. If, for example, they work in consulting, there are a lot of Sloanees that work in consulting, and they happen to work on a lot of projects with them, so they may have several notes. Again, that doesn't mean that they're going to get admitted or interviewed, but it will show me that this person has interacted with Sloan candidates and that Sloan candidates see the same kind of qualities that they see in their classmates and in themselves and would like to further in the community here.
Where do you put extracurriculars on the application?
Where do you put extracurriculars in the application? On your resume, or in your video, or in your cover letter. Again, these are the places where you have a little freedom to talk about things, so it's up to you to determine how important is this extracurricular activity. If it's something that you want to showcase in the video, use the video. If it's just something that you want us to know that you like to do, use the resume. If it shows some of those competency, behavioral kind of details, use the cover letter. So again, it's really your judgment, but these are the different places I think that there might be possibilities for that. All right, well, I think we're going to wrap up now. So goodbye, live stream. Thank you for joining us. Certainly, if you have any questions, send our office an email or look this up on YouTube and rewatch it to get any answers or details that you might have missed. For those of you in the room, thank you so much for joining us in person. I always love getting to see new faces here in Cambridge. I like that people take the time to learn about the school and visit the school, so I hope that you have the opportunity to do some visiting. It's a relatively quiet time here, being on break, but please feel free to wander around, and please feel free to grab us if you have a more personal situation that you want to discuss. We'll hang around for a few minutes to answer any of those questions. So have a wonderful day. I hope this jump-started your morning, and good luck on those round 2 applications.